People in general, especially men, respond to top down. They need to do the sense making, the analysis first before they do the deeper work. And that's how you establish their trust too. By them having a cerebral psychological understanding, then you go into the embodiment piece. And that's what's great about this information era that we live in now.
I want to start out with your 30-second origin story. How did you find your way into men's coaching, and when did you realize this is my specialty?
I started in a bit of an unorthodox way as a sex worker. I got to know men in that environment from a very unique lens, a one-on-one environment with them. And what I realized that they would disclose to me things that they would never share with a partner, their regular therapist, and a colleague, anyone else. It was this radical, unmatched intimacy. And a byproduct of that came from attunement. It's like if you're already in an intimate container with someone, then you're going to end up, they're going to by default share a lot with you. So I didn't have a clue what sexology was. I didn't know that was a field or anything. I was just like, there's something interesting happening here where I'm learning about the most vulnerable parts of men. I always like to say sexology is kind of the medium for all things because it's the most vulnerable parts of ourselves. You engage with the man in that container, then it gives you a key to how he operates in everything else in life. So that's kind of what lured me in. And I lived a divided life myself. And then years later, I was like, why is it that I'm still so fascinated with this? And it was doing the deeper work with men. I went back to school, became a sexologist, and then just started, I wasn't sure if I was going to work with men, women, both, whatever. And just by default, by me starting to share about being very open about my experience as a worker, that by default just attracted men to work with me because I was very vulnerable. I'm big on self-disclosure because that's how you establish trust, especially with men.
What is one trend in this industry or in men's health that genuinely excites you?
For men specifically, what I love is we're in this kind of growth optimization, like biohacking
Yeah.
era, right? Which can have some like annoying connotations. But when it comes to men doing the deeper work, that's the exact mindset that you want. We optimize for everything else in our lives. Why wouldn't we optimize for our intimate lives, for our health? If you're a professional athlete, there's no shame around going to nutritionists, coaches, trainers, whatever. So why aren't we doing that with our intimate lives and sexual health? So we're seeing that starting to happen finally, and that's becoming normalized. And I find that men are actually a lot easier to work with in that regard because of this culture we're living in, the biohacking, the growth mindset, the optimization. So I'm loving that.
Amazing. Have you noticed like an age range that seems to be more perceptive? Like, is it millennial men, Gen Z men, or is it just kind of the same across the board?
I would say millennial down. Gen Z men are less likely to come to this work early on because they're also educating themselves, which is really
Yeah.
cool to
Yeah.
see. They're kind of growing up with this access to information that millennials, my generation, didn't have. But yeah, I would say definitely millennials soon to be, and Gen X as well, tend to be like the sweet spot for me. And that again comes with the access to information. People are just
Yeah.
becoming more insatiably curious. There's more out there with the whole podcast trend that we're seeing, which obviously I have one as well,
Yes.
specifically talking about men. What's really cool is we're getting to witness the human experience, right? Initially, when this started, it was all experts talking about expert things. And
Right.
now you're seeing podcasters and voices and experts also humanizing themselves. I'm one of those people. It's like the reason I'm so invested in this work is because I'm constantly trying to figure it out for myself. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot that I'm trying to learn for myself still. And I think as a coach or as a therapist, you just have to be a few steps ahead of your clients or your patient. Anyone that claims to have figured it all out, you don't trust those people, but you have to have some skin in the game yourself, pun intended.
I love it. Some skin in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've even noticed that too, like with my own kid. My middle child is 11 and she's like, I guess, Gen Alpha. Even when she's not feeling good, she'll like start researching like her symptoms and be like, this is what I found on the internet. I'm like, oh, actually, like what you found is probably right. I've noticed that with her generation, even with Gen Z too. They do a lot of their own research and homework on things.
Which can be insidious in some ways. I watched you do an interview with David Lay, who obviously spoke at the conference as well, about AI, and right, you're talking about ChatGPT. There is a cap on that, and we should be careful there. But I think people in general, especially men, respond to top down. It's like they need to do the sense making, the analysis first before they do the deeper work. And that's how you establish their trust too. By them having a cerebral psychological understanding, then you go into the embodiment piece, right? And that's what's great about this information era that we live in now.
Right. And we need qualified people sharing information. And that is so important, like with what you do with your socials and your podcast. And it's accessible to everyone, but it's good information from a professional who has the education.
Yeah, well, I think it's a mix of the education and the lived experience as primary knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what my talk back at the conference in October centered around. I was talking to Chris Donahue about this too, because he was like, whatever the tens of thousands of clinical hours that he has, he's like, that's primary knowledge for me as well. So I think you need both of those things to really be in and of service, right, to your clients, to your patients.
Definitely. If you could teach the world one key insight about this field, something that really moves the needle, what would that be?
I would definitely say when we're talking about working with men specifically, selective self-disclosure is huge. There's a lot of barriers to trust with men. I get asked a lot, like, well, how are you supposed to work with men? Like, don't you just get like fetishized or whatever? And I like to bring also erotic transference. I'd like to workshop that. What part of you feels like you need to people please me or seduce or tell me what I want to hear? Do you not feel like you can be accepted as whole and also be an erotic being? I like to share like my own experiences in that as well. I think also attunement, which is something I learned by default as a worker, bringing that into practice, into coaching and into therapeutic clinical practice is super important. I think that aftercare also in practice is important. This is what I'd love to see, and this is how I work with my clients. I don't just do weekly sessions boxed in. Like I'll have fluid communication with them because sometimes you have some pretty big revelations come through, some pretty big moments. It's heavy work that you're unpacking, and I don't want them to feel abandoned after that. They'll have the insights and the revelations and the clarifying, questions that surface in between sessions. I want to guide them through that. So I believe in a more like fluid multidisciplinary approach there. If we're talking about relationships in specific and healing our relationship to sexuality, it's important that you are in a form of relationship with your therapist, with your coach. I believe in my clients more than they believe in themselves, and that's really important. You really have to be invested in that relationship, and it should not be cut and dry. So that's what I like to see where this is going. And that's what I see, everyone that's at SHA is equally as invested in their clients and their patients and in their practice. Also the embodiment piece for themselves. Are we practicing what we preach? I like to say, I don't go to a plumber for legal advice. Like, why would I go to a therapist who doesn't live it in their own respect? I want to know what they can relate to my own lived experience, or else I'm not going to be able to trust their expertise. So those are probably the core takeaways for me that I think are definitely underserved in our industry.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about aftercare because just thinking back on my journey, seeing different therapists and things, I've had some sessions where like I've been crying and had like this emotional breakthrough or response. And then when it's over, you don't talk to anybody about it. Another like maybe 2 weeks, a month, I don't know, however often you see your therapist. And
Yeah.
there is no like communication after, and you do feel kind of wrung out.
Yeah, and I also want to know in those moments of rupture in the real world with your partner, with someone you're dating, if you're feeling like a compulsive behavior come up, I want to know so that will better inform our work together when that's happening. And rather than you defaulting to a certain behavior, let's flag that. Let's workshop that real time. I don't just want to workshop things in session. I want to know the practical application of that in your day-to-day life, what's surfacing for you, and not abandon you in those moments. Especially working with men, it's rooted in shame. To abandon them in the in-between it would not be rooted in integrity for me either, which is why I feel like I'm an expert in this, was being held in those moments between, was being held and seen in those moments between, and not having it not be boxed in so much.
Now at Shaw, we train many people who are wanting to work in men's health. What's the most important thing professionals need to know about coaching men in this space?
I always like to start with determining the origin of the split. Okay, so what are your sexual proclivities? What is the focus? What's coming up for you? and then breaking that down from an analytical framework. And I work a lot with the Madonna horror complex. So it's like, what's this first moment that you felt like you had to suppress or repress this part of you? Because a lot of what I work with is men that come from SLAA, so Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, using psychology as the framework to unpack the deeper parts of ourselves. Is just the symptom. That's just the external symptom we're using, but it informs every part of our lives. So really getting to the origin of that split. When did you first betray self? When did you first feel betrayed by other? And then again, what I just love to see for all practitioners is that selective self-disclosure. I think it's so important to humanize these experiences, right? It's sex and death. Like these are like, they're not going anywhere in our lives. There's a reason why sex work is the oldest profession, and porn, you can believe what you want about it, but it's not going anywhere. So the more we try to eradicate it, look how prohibition worked. It didn't, right?
Right.
The more we can bring in the human experience and that self-disclosure, the more we're going to normalize our sexuality, and we're not going to feel the need to suppress, repress, or split and conceal these parts of ourselves. What I like to work with a lot as well is expanding our sexual lexicon. So empowering our clients to understand the difference between fantasy, desire, kinks, and fetishes, right? You're not bad for your fantasies. Fantasies can live in the mind, and that's okay. Now, if those become like compulsive thoughts, that's very different. But what happens, and I see a lot, is basic education. There isn't that. Bad for thinking the thought as you are for doing it. Not the case. So really empowering our clients to just have a baseline understanding, a lexicon of what each of those means is a great place to start, right? Especially the younger generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about the stereotype that men are like emotionally unavailable or they're not going to be receptive to therapy or coaching?
I've had the opposite experience entirely. So, and that again came with me humanizing myself. I also I've had a couple of clients in particular where I want them to bring everything to the session. If they're in a weird mood, if they're feeling some sort of way, if I say something and they feel like they can't trust what I said. I had this recently with a client where he was very hyper vigilant, and I shared something and he's like, that didn't align with what you said earlier. And I'm like, well, you said something earlier and I don't know if I want to bring, and I'm like, no, please bring it up. Trust is imperative to this work.
Right.
I think men will push back initially because they're seeking deeper truth. Like they want to trust that you will stay with them in the process. Establishing trust is huge. Men feel just as much as women do. It's just getting to it takes a different path. Trust is paramount to all of it, even if we're looking into relationships. I don't like to use falling in love. I think falling in trust is way more important, and love is a byproduct of trust. So using that same framework for my practice is super important. Men need to be invited to share, to be vulnerable, or else you're getting the overshare. And usually that means that their objective for doing work isn't really aligned. It's like they're looking for surface level outcomes, as opposed to it is a longer process to get men to be vulnerable. And which is why the more you can be human with them in that experience and accept all parts of them that come up, the more you're going to get from the session, which is why I also believe in like longer term work within a container. I don't, for example, do one-off sessions. I do like minimum 3 months. Usually I average 6 months, but we have objectives. And then of course they're at choice if they want to do deeper work, but it's like we're healing something. I want that to work within a container. I don't want to keep it open-ended forever. I want to empower you with the tools. So you have this lexicon, you have this knowledge database, you have the tools, you're equipped to then take that into your own life. Like I said, working with men that come from and Love Addicts Anonymous, which we don't believe in sex addiction, right?
Right.
A lot of them then are out of marriages, recently divorced, or entering the dating market again. And they're like, well, how do I do this? I just can't have sex. Can't masturbate. And I'm like, no, you actually can. Here's how to do it consciously. So then by empowering them, by liberating them in that, and giving them choice and teaching them, consensual communication, and how erotic also that communication it can be with new partners that doesn't actually involve sex. And it's like the slow burn of that. I'm just all about giving men as many tools as possible, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you could leave one message for the next generation about men's health, what would it be and why does it matter right now?
I think we've totally over-indexed on technicalities of sex, and I hate that. This is not a performance. It's not a one size fits all. We are different, evolving, ever-changing beings. Men are taught to evaluate their sexual worth by like erections and stamina and partner satisfaction instead of like the deeper markers of sexual health and nervous system regulation, emotional balance, emotional safety. It's empowering men to educate them that dysfunction isn't dysfunction. It's what is our body trying to tell us? And what do you consider normal? What do you consider what will make you happy? I don't want a comparison model. I self-pleasure usually like once a day. I don't
Yeah.
consider that compulsive because it is not disrupting my life in any way. So
Yeah.
just educating men on that. And then we're seeing, record levels of like ED and low libido, porn, anxiety, and all of that. And it's not because men are broken, but they're dysregulated and misinformed. Giving them more information. This is what I'd love to see with the new paradigm of education in general. Is that compulsive, or have you just been told that's compulsive? Sexual health becomes sustainable when men understand their nervous system, their attachment style, their fantasies, their desires, their relational dynamics, and the difference between what turns them on mentally and what they actually desire. So it's just the more we can, especially because men are more thinking. I always say it's like if you want to know how a man feels, ask him what he thinks about something. So it's just liberating them. In there is no dysfunction. We are all whole, right? It's
Yeah.
only to your level of expansion. What are the goals for you and yourself? Not what you've been told is normal, not what you've been told you should or shouldn't do. Like, right? We just left NoFap November. Now, I have different views about that because I'm someone that has practiced Tantra. I have some friends and colleagues that practice semen retention. And it's like, that's how men have full body orgasms. There's definitely a lot there to be explored. That's
Mhm.
different than abstinence. That's different
Yeah.
than just no fap and white knuckling because our sexual energy is a replenishable resource. It's our
Yeah.
life force. It's our creative energy, right? It's like what keeps us invested in life. It keeps us alive. I don't believe in suppressing that and repressing that. And how can we use that instead of diminishing it to empower us, actually liberate us in life and in relationships?
Right, right. It's all about what's the intention behind that,
Yeah, I'm someone that would personally rather have incredible maybe a couple times a week rather than like, okay, it's 5 p.m. It's time to we'll have assumptions about me that I'm some nymphomaniac because I was for all of this and and it's like, no, we're all completely different. We are all completely different. And one of the other things I'll say about like Tantra too that I do love is they're big on soft penetration and just whatever's alive for you in the moment, not having goals in terms of we both need to come a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
We're under no obligation to be who we were 5 minutes ago. And that's what I love about Chris Donahue's work in particular. Him and I both nerd out on like being anti-identity. And I believe the same thing for sexuality. Who I was the last year is not at all who I am now. My desires, my fantasies, my own proclivities are different. Once we have that knowledge, then we're empowered, then we're at choice, we're at decision. I had my own views about non-monogamous relationships and about I assumed that hotwifing was more or less the same as cuckoldry, which is entirely different. Then I
Yeah.
have like a new fascination with hotwifing or like the stag vixen dynamic. Energetically, relationally, they all mean completely different things. And the trust that can be born from those dynamics is like really profound and significant. I didn't think a couple of years ago that love could coexist or emotional loyalty could coexist with a dynamic like that. Now my views are totally changed. And I
Yeah.
love that. I love constantly calling myself out on this. Even
Yes.
as a professional, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly evolving. And again, my own sexual proclivities are changing and diversifying. And that's what I love about this field. It's never ending. We are never bored. We are never bored.
Right.
Like
Never.
this is like an industry. I'm not worried about AI personally for what we do because I'll never stop learning. Like I
Right.
invest equally in my own education on in an ongoing basis, and which is something else I love about the SHA community. Is all the experts are constantly coming to the live weekends.
Yeah.
We're constant, we bring ourselves to the conferences. We want to share our knowledge and learn from others. It's so exciting. It's so riveting. And I don't see that ever ending, especially with the SHA community.
Right. I love that. And I agree. Like, there's no gatekeeping. Everyone's
No.
invited. Everyone
Yeah.
can join in on our expert weekends at the annual conference. Like, come learn from all of these great people. We don't
Yeah.
gatekeep our community or our presenters. Like, it's like, come
Yeah.
join us.
And the other organizations and fields in general. And I love that we can all just borrow from each other. I love like the community on Facebook. It's like I just brought, a client issue of mine there the other week, and the responses I got, it was like, oh, this is so great. It was like right away I could bring that to a session. I love
Yes.
how collaborative everyone is. Yeah, like you said, not the gatekeeping. Because if we look at sex positivity and how we do one thing is how we do everything. And that really, the SHA community really epitomizes that. It's a
Yeah.
collaborative effort so we can bring more to our clients and more to ourselves. And we share amongst ourselves. We share about our own pain points in our practices, and we share
Yeah.
about, our own experiences with clients. The fact that it's such a free place to do that, where it's like we don't feel like we have to know it all, which you
Mm.
can't say in general therapeutic psychotherapy field, right? It's everyone's coming at it from I figured it all out on the expert. And with sexuality, I wouldn't trust it if you did. So I'm glad that we can voice all of this.
Yeah. I will leave it there. It's always a joy to talk to you. Thank you for being with
Thank
us
you.
today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
All right. Bye, everyone.